I'm sure, like many of you, it's quite overwhelming seeing the mass violence that we're still seeing even today, with Israel bombing both Gaza and Lebanon just this week. That, with the bombardment of information, can be quite paralysing against the backdrop of hypocrisy. I know Ben has already touched on it, but I think we can all agree the UN-backed peace plan by the US is actually laughable. Not a single Palestinian has been consulted, and it is essentially more Western colonialism, which apparently is living live and well even today. We see this from the occupation of Palestine all the way to the attacks on Venezuela, and we see this from people being dragged from the streets in America to our own government considering taking the last items of some of the most vulnerable people in our society to back and continue that faithful ally of colonialism, racism. This is a worthy topic, but far too broad, so maybe I should speak about the mass attacks on speech. We've seen Richard Falk, a 95-year-old Princeton professor, arrested by Canada this week as a threat to their security for the simple act of investigating Canada's complicity in the Gazan genocide. We've seen Sami Hamid, a British political commentator, arrested by America, and we have seen our own authoritarian government attack Palestine Action and the wonderful people from our communities that have dared to stand up to them also be attacked, arrested, and charged with terrorism. But again, if I went down this road, I would need more than 8 minutes. I could tell you about my wonderful Arabic teacher in Gaza and the stories she shared with me about a man who lost his wife and his 3 daughters, or how she still teased her younger sister who achieved the top 20% in her school despite the war, but still laughing at her because she said, well, it's easier because it's online, as if studying through a genocide would really be easier. I could tell you about my own family in the West Bank who has shared stories where the violence has been unprecedented and they have never seen or lived under anything like it. Settlers burning and attacking them villages every single day, and the IDF taking liberties and blocking roads relentlessly. If you are here, you already know the brutality Palestinians endure. So the question becomes, what can we do? What are the things we need to challenge, and how do we go forwards? This finally came to me when I was watching an interview with Israeli journalist Gideon Levy, someone I quite often agree with and has been openly critical of the Israeli regime. He said the problem with Palestine, it doesn't have the things needed for a viable state. And it wasn't that I disagreed with this, it was something eerie moved inside me. And I realised it's because I'd heard this phrase before. I'd heard it through Rory Stewart on his podcast, and I'd heard it through so many MPs when they were given the question, will you recognise Palestine? It was something along the lines of, I support it, but the conditions have to be right. And suddenly I saw it. We've entered the new echo chamber, and we must ask ourselves, why is this question being pushed, and what do they really mean? Because Palestine is a state. It is a state that is under occupation. It has politicians, mayors, civic leaders, community leaders, religious leaders. It has schools, it has headmasters, it has businesses, it has town planners and city planners and builders and bus drivers and bin men. It has a shared history and a shared culture. It is a state. Now, you can argue that their leaders may be corrupt, but certainly no more corrupt than our own. And I would certainly argue they would be far less so if we were not pushing an idea where the occupier collects their taxes and gives it to their leaders on best behaviour. You could argue that there are fractions within Palestine, and I would agree, but no more than here. If you look at France to the UK to America, I would guess you would struggle to find a single person that unites us all. You can argue that they don't have such strong laws, but if you look at the way that our politicians have been treating international law, that argument also would not stand. No, the issue is not that Oh, sorry. And you can also argue that some of them are violent, but certainly through my lifetime, I have seen multiple parties and politicians cause mass violence across the globe. No, you can argue. Sorry. No, the issue is not that Palestine is incapable of running its own state, and it is not that it is not its own state. If this were true, Israel and its allies would not spend so much energy arresting its leaders, confiscating its funds, destroying its schools, murdering its doctors, raiding its universities, and actively breaking up these communities. When they say Palestine is not ready for a state, what they really mean is Palestine does not have a state that is suitable for Western colonial interests. It has resisted, and for that, it will not be permitted. So the next time someone tells you Palestine is not ready for a state, I want you to remember this. Palestine is a state, and given the chance to truly rule itself, it would be less violent, less corrupt, and less racist than a state that denies its existence.
We're unfortunately still needed as a movement. Despite the proposed ceasefire, it's a farce. From everything I've seen myself, is essentially used to deny Palestinians their own rights, their existence, to demilitarise all of Gaza, to remove all weapons, remove any means they have to defend themselves, and frankly, it just looks like a means to allow Israel to attack them in the future, but more easily. Since the ceasefire has been called, I looked up acts of violations of it, divided between Hamas and Israel. The side from Hamas is essentially limited to logistical errors and a couple of acts of random violence. One of the major ones is them being accused of firing RPGs towards Israeli soldiers, which was then found to be caused by a bulldozer running over a munitions dump. On Israel's side, however, as Ben Jamal has said, over 300 Palestinians have been killed, over 600 others have been injured. Just a couple of days ago, Reuters reported of the airstrikes that had killed 33. It's unfortunate that our movement still needs to be going on, but I just wanted to thank each and every one of you in this room and elsewhere who has donated to our branch and helped keep the movement going. It is through your support that we are able to do what we are able to do these protests, send people on coaches to the protests, raise money from that to get what aid we can get into, campaign to our MPs, organise protests, organise BDS events, and everything else. So I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all of it. Your support keeps the gears of this branch going, and it means that we can hold our own events here, such as music nights with Spate at Vinyl Fans we did earlier this year, and of course the Festival of Palestinian Culture that managed to raise over £1,000 for MAP. I think the festival is one of the more important things that we do, because while the suffering of the Palestinians is of course incredibly important, I think it's equally important to celebrate them as a people, share and educate others on the richness of their culture and their history, to remind everyone that they are not just numbers, they are a civilization, they are a people, they are a culture whose history goes back thousands of years. And so I'd just like to finish by again saying, whether you donate to our branch on a monthly basis, to National PSC on a monthly basis, whether you have bought tickets to go on one of our coaches, or even if all you've done is just dropped a bit of small change into a donation bucket, you have our heartfelt thanks from all of us for all the support that you do and give us. Thank you so much.
There are still 94 doctors who are held hostage, and there are 1,722 health workers who've lost their lives. And I think the work that's been done nationally and locally, raising the issue of how important it is, if you want to attack a people, then actually part of what you want to destroy is their health service and their schools. And I think I said at our last vigil that in a way a health service is the cement that binds a society together. It's the part, it's the caring part, isn't it? And it's not surprising that Israel has really targeted the health system and targeted health workers in, many stories that we've heard in the most really horrific and destructive way. But I think what we have to keep doing, I mean, Liz has talked about and Jamila's talked about the role that we can play in the council in terms of disinvestment. I think the role we play inside the health service is also extremely important. I think our last vigil was very, very, moving, and I think it's something that allows us to keep reaching a new audience of health workers and beyond. I think people find it incredible that it's locking up 94 doctors. I mean, imagine if you locked up 2,700 doctors in the UK for no reason. Imagine if you went into hospitals all over Britain and you arrested 2,700 doctors and you wouldn't even say where they were and you tortured them. I mean, it's so incredible, isn't it? And so I think one of the things I actually wanted to talk about what we could actually do between now and Christmas, because I think all of us feel this immense, like we have to do something, don't we? It's not enough to tell the story, although the story is an important one and there are still many people who don't know it. So I think one of the things that we could do concretely is I think we should actually do a specific health leaflet. We should leaflet DCH, and then we should actually give people some notice that we're going to do a massive collection for medical aid for Palestine. And I think we should have another vigil. Yes, it's so little, and yet I think, to just call the words of, Suzanne was talking about the importance of the struggle against imperialism, in Ireland. And I can always remember Eamon McCann, who's a socialist activist in Derry, since the 1960s. And he always said that, until Ireland is free, people in the UK can never be free. And I think those words are completely the same with Palestine. We know that until Palestine is free, we can never be free. They're our brothers and sisters. We share, their struggle, and their struggle actually strengthens our struggle. And we certainly have plenty of struggles, including the latest one, where they actually want to, for people earning under 25,000 in the NHS, the migrants who are keeping our NHS going, they want to send those people back. That's the latest cruelty, again, the latest racism that they want. And that will affect many, many people in every hospital and every social care workplace. Healthcare assistants on a band 3 don't earn 25,000. And they're prepared to send those people back. So we have to unite these struggles, and actually the struggle in the solidarity we show Palestinians always strengthens our own struggle. When you show solidarity to others, you get an enormous amount back that you hadn't even realised, because you always feel that if people in Palestine can struggle, then actually we can struggle too for all the injustices that we face, and create that better world that includes, and at the top of that agenda is a free Palestine.
A while ago, after one of the many crimes that Israel committed, it sort of made me, raging. I think when some of their special forces went dressed up as health workers and went into hospital and executed someone, it made me think I need to do something. So went to somebody I knew would give money. And so starting with someone that one of your workmates that will give money, started a collection for Matt, and by doing that and then it got some momentum going, and that's a good way of actually raising the issue and then going around people. But the other thing that I was going to say about doing that, you don't start with the person who's not going to give money, in other words, but just for anyone in any workplace, a way of starting to do that. But the good thing that I was going to say that also did is that laid the basis for setting up the start of an anti-racist group where we are as well. Now, I am a health worker and I'm in a unionised workplace, so people say, well, that's a bit easier than elsewhere. Maybe, but it's still got to be done, it's still got to be organised. And I think that's really important. But some of those people who gave money for MAP, it meant it starts to take on a load of other arguments, I think, and it's actually makes it a nicer place to work. And actually it sort of reinforces the argument. I mean, I absolutely echo everything that Lynn said. But it actually reminds people that migrants have built our NHS. You know, it's something that's worth defending, but also that means not a lot unless you spread out and actually recognise what's going on around the world. So, yeah, that was it. Cheers.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Paul Kimber. I'm a member of Unite and secretary of our Bournemouth, and I've actually tried to tag the name of Dorset retired members. And believe you and me, retired members have a lot of problems. And from the last speaker, if it wasn't for migrants, I wouldn't be alive now. I went into the hospital, I had 5 minutes to live. And those guys were running me everywhere. Couple of points I want to make. I used to be on the board of the co-op. And if anybody's not a member of the co-op, can I urge you to think about it? It has the semblance of a democratic organisation. Members get onto the board and members can dictate policy. Now, there used to be, when I was on the board, a lot of conflict between the managers and the members, and it was the members that had to win through at their annual meetings. And I remember an occasion when we found out that Palestinians were growing oranges and then selling them for next to nothing to Israelis, and the Israelis were then selling it on to us, the co-op. I remember that about 15 years ago we managed to stop those oranges coming into the country because Palestinians were being exploited. Make no member, so if any of you ever feel like are not a member of the co-op, you feel like I believe it's about £1, but I don't think they even charge you these days. But if you think about membership, you do have a say. And the point I also want to make is it's always going to be difficult to keep the co-op away from divesting into Israel. You know, there'll always be that urge where management and managers will try to say, well, we can't quite do this, or we're finding it tough. Let's go back and do it. Last point I wanted to make was the Dorset County Pension Fund. It was lost by one vote. That's sad, and it was quite a good debate, but again, the people didn't say much. It was the BCP, which is the Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council, and the Dorset Council, who have joint pension sharing arrangements, but we lost it by one vote. Now, I don't know when the time is right for us to go to do it again, but there could be a time coming up. All right, that's enough from me.
There's three things I wanted to say, but just before that, I just want to say that since the Palestine campaign, the last 2 years, it's been I've felt the most angry, the most sad, the most tearful, the most enraged, I've never felt this way before over anything in all the years that I've actually been involved in, political campaigning, and it's such an important position. And so there's 3 points. I've got 3 minutes, right? I just think that for us here, we have to really understand how the history of Palestine, and I think that because there's so many people and so many young people now getting involved, they don't know what's happened in the past. They think 7th of October was the beginning, and we have to say, well, why did that happen? And we have to look to the past. And I think for us, when we have demonstrations and the massive protests we've had, which has been brilliant, it does mean quite a lot to people in Gaza, because Britain is behind a lot of what's happened in Gaza. The British state imperialism and everything has been so involved from the Balfour Declaration 1917, and I think that we have to, as supporters of the Palestine campaign, we have to make sure that we know all these facts, because people want to know and they don't get it at school, they don't hear about it on the news. If you look at the news, you think, my God, I don't even look at the news anymore, I can't bear it. So, and when you talk about collective punishment, well, actually, it wasn't the Israelis that started the collective punishment, they learned it from the British. There's lots of things like that people need to know, and we need to be armed. Not physically, obviously.
Why not?
I could get arrested now. I mean, we need to be armed with arguments so that we can actually take that forward and convince people. And Phil's book is a fantastic way to arm ourselves. And there's some books at the back that you can come to the store and he'll sign it for you. It's fantastic, really, really fantastic book. So the second thing is, for me as a socialist, I feel that how when we look at how Palestine can be free, we have to look at all the things that we do, what you were saying, the demonstrations, the coaches, the massive campaigns, the investment, everything is really, really excellent. But actually it's the strength of ordinary working class people that at the end of the day, and I see us as ordinary working class people, that actually can help change what's happening in Palestine. You look to the Middle East and the massive working class movement there is in Egypt. It could be fantastic. When you look at what's happened with the Italian dockers and how they stop the arms going in, stop the boats, shut it down, the oil tankers refusing to move stuff. Really inspiring. I mean, imagine if everywhere around the world did that. We would shut down, there would be no arms industry, no war machine. So we do have the power, actually. We are still the majority, and we have to remember that. And I think with what Liz was saying, it's really important, actually, for us to get more people involved in the unions that work in Dorset. And that's one of the things we're going to be doing in the new year, is making sure we start going around to the FBU, the post office. There's lots of unions that we don't have a lot of connection with, and we need to pull people into activity in Dorset. And I think, the fact that PSC have got a meeting tomorrow with all trade unions is really important as well. And so the last thing I really want to say is that as a woman, I feel, what's happened in Palestine, when you look at the women there that are giving birth in tents, it's flooded, that there's no baby formula, there's no nappies, there's no nothing, and they're still resistant and they're still fighting back. It gives me such a lot of, I don't know, I could cry thinking about it. I can't imagine being there, to be honest. And I think that we have to see them as, not as victims, but as fighters. And women often lead everything. I mean, if you remember Sudan, and there was that picture of that woman on top of the car, I must try and get it. It was a fantastic picture of showing how women were leading, the revolution there. And I think here, we've got women against the far right. We've got the bloody fascists, and pretending that they're the friends of the women, that it's all the refugees doing everything. We have to really stand together. And I think that one of the things we should do, which is what we did last year, is that International Women's Day in March, we had a rally in Weymouth, and we had it for Palestine in honour of, the Palestinian women that are fighting back. And I think we should do that again not this year, but, in March, because it takes a while to organise and have it a lot bigger. And just the final thing really is, I think, we should be inspired by the women that are fighting back and the women that are really brave and continuing to look after their families. And we have to bring that inspiration, bravery to Dorset, because, we can do that here and do a lot more. And I think the pension scheme, we're thinking of showing the film 36, Palestine 36, so we can get the cinema that Lynn's trying to do. We should do the campaign around Free Dr. Hassam Safar. I had the picture, but I think it's fallen down. Is it? Oh my God. And so there's lots of things to do. And if people aren't here, members, come and see us at the back of the store. And just really, I want to say that we produced this 2 years ago, which said Dorset stands with Palestine. And we're very small here. We might not be the vanguard, but we punch above our weight, and we're going to continue. So free Palestine!
Yes, I'd like to ask a question for anyone really, but perhaps particularly to Ben. And it's about Palestinian unity, because it strikes me that one of the extraordinary things about Palestinian history is the way that Palestinians have remained overall unified in their aim of achieving a liberated Palestine. And that goes back to the Mandate period, the period of British colonial control. And there have been all these efforts over the generations to divide Palestinians. The British, of course, were experts at divide and rule all over their empire, and they tried to use the conservative leadership, the landed dynasties of Palestine in the 30s, to suppress the Palestinian movement from below. You had the leaders of the Zionist movement tried to create a type of breakaway group of Palestinian mayors in the 1930s to weaken the national movement. I remember in the 1970s, some people in the room might remember this, the Israelis created something called the Village Leagues. And the Village Leagues were a type of attempt to create a network of collaborators to, act against the mass of the Palestinians. And what put me in mind of this was I was listening to The World at 1 today on Radio 4, as one sometimes does. And the BBC gave about 10 minutes airtime to this effort which is being made by Israel in Gaza to create all these rival militias that are being armed and supplied by Israel. And they had these leaders of some of these sort of clan militias speaking, who were boasting to Palestinians that if you come over to the area that we control, then we can feed you, and we've got health services, and the schools are functioning. So there's a type of vulgar effort against divide and rule, but this goes back through imperial history, doesn't it, over the generations. And what strikes me is that Palestinians have maintained an agenda of unity going back over the generations and have managed to defeat these initiatives. But I just want to ask, and maybe Ben is best qualified to respond to this question, though others may have their ideas. Given the extraordinary difficult circumstances in Gaza at the moment that we're all aware of, can the Palestinians maintain their unity around the idea of national liberation when yet again there's another attempt to divide them and to attack their resolve? So anyone, but especially Ben, thank you.
I don't want to ignore the question that was asked about Palestinian unity. Look, I have to say I don't fully agree. I mean, it was absolutely right. This is the tactic of divide and rule is a tactic that is used by Israel. And those of you who've seen the film that Liz just referenced, if you haven't, I'd urge you to go and see it. It's a tactic that was obviously well utilised by the British and is during the mandate period and is documented in there. And look, the reality is Palestinians haven't always remained unified against tactics. We all remember the disunity caused by the Oslo Accords, which, let me speak for a second, not necessarily as the director of PSC, but as a Palestinian, was a fundamental historic mistake in my view. But what I would say, and I think this was what's being referenced, is Palestinians have remained absolutely unified in their resilience. And we saw that manifested again in those extraordinary scenes when this ceasefire was called. Palestinians are not stupid. They knew what we knew, how fragile this was, that Israel would continue to attack Palestinians. They knew the basis of the deal being outlined. They know that Israel's violated every ceasefire agreement. And yet what did they do? They marched back to what was left of their homes, determined not to abandon their land and not to succumb. And so that has always been, as I said, fundamental part of what is required for liberation.
The colonialism playbook, they can't rule themselves, but the conditions, and that's exactly what they said to the Irish. We couldn't rule, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. We weren't clever enough when we had everything that the Palestinian peoples had. And look whose society and economic policies are glowing today, and we are far greater than the UK now.
One of the things that Jamina said was about the inability to recognise the Palestinian state, the idea that Palestinians are incapable of ruling themselves. Those of us who are old enough to remember the 1980s and before that, when there was apartheid South Africa, that was exactly the same mantra we heard day in, day out. They're incapable of ruling themselves. And I know it's not perfect now in South Africa, but look where they are today. They are a very advanced society and a stable society as well. And I see that as a paradigm example of what Palestinians can achieve, but we need to support them in that endeavour. And the apartheid system was only overthrown in South Africa because of international support and continual pressure And so I echo what all the other speakers are saying, that that pressure just has to be maintained until we get there.
My name's Diane, and I've got a question really to put to the audience, picking up on what Sam said about women leading the fight, and what Phil just said about the BBC, which we don't even like to mention. I personally don't. I actually forced myself to watch the BBC this week, and on the world stage, Ben was saying, about the world stage, we had Trump there, and we had the ruler of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we rolled out the red carpet for one who has been a lot of his time on the part of his time on the Epstein Island, where the 14-year-old girl there was dead in Australia, and we have the King of Saudi Arabia who's admitted murder. And why are we rolling out the red carpet for these leaders? But we're definitely not following. But how we end up in this fix is the first, because I couldn't even, I had to just turn it off because I thought, what am I looking at here? He's admitting it, and we've got this carpet rolled out for him. He's got all the pomp in the world. And the second thing was about, I spoke to a member of the PSC this week, and she does a online language forum, and she had a man from the IDF call up. He wanted a language course in English, but actually she said when I clicked on and opened it up, he actually said, I don't really want to learn English. What I want to really know is, what do you in the West, what do you actually think of us? And she said, it was quite a strange feeling. I thought, well, do you actually want me to tell you the truth? And he said, yeah, I really want you to tell me the truth. What do you think of us? And she just said, I had to tell him the truth, that we're actually disgusted, and this is... So they do feel it. They are feeling it. They must be feeling it. They're also humans at the end of the day.
For my senior secretary of wonderful Dorset PSC, which is wonderful because of all the people in the room. Okay. There's a book by a very renowned Holocaust historian called Dan Stone. It was actually written before the genocide in Gaza, and the title of the book is The Holocaust, An Unfinished History. And it's a very deliberately chosen title by Dan Stone, because the argument that he makes is that what led states to be complicit, party to, and tolerate the Holocaust, the forces and rationales that led to that, are with us still today. Hence the title of his book, An Unfinished History. And I think one of the most important points that struck me on reading the book was when he wrote that one thing that the Holocaust tells us is that there is no limit to which states will go or will tolerate if they see it as their own interest being at stake, unless they are stopped, unless something stands in their way. And for me, that title resonates with Gaza. I think this is an important question to understand, because everyone, we all say, how can this be tolerated? How can our own government not only be complicit, but a participant in this horror over 2 years? And not only just our government, but all the other governments of the Western world and so on. And I think we have to locate the answer in the kind of nature of the world order and system that we live in, and the interests of these states, and just how far they will go and tolerate. But there's also that other force that all the speakers, I think, tonight, both Ben, Liz, our local speakers, and the contributions from the floor, have identified, not in a kind of rah-rah way, not to deceive ourselves that it's ever onwards and upwards. There are real challenges and difficulties, but there is nothing more important than continuing to build the mass movement with every small action that we can with every mass mobilisation that we can. We need to fill that coach on the 29th of November, which is the International Day of Solidarity with Palestine, and there will be demonstrations across the globe on that day. And I think we should, I know we stretch every time, but we should stretch again. And are there new people who've not? There are people who will go on every protest. That of the 32 protests, there have been thousands of people who've not been on a protest before, and we should make that true. I think of this one. I'll finish there, because I think the other points have been made by previous speakers. But let's never forget that when you're in the middle of a mass movement, it can seem prolonged, it can seem difficult, it can seem that the other side can resist, the pressure. But everyone who campaigned against the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese themselves defeated 3 empires over a quarter of a century. South Africa, they fought for decades against apartheid. And it must have seemed to those involved in the anti-apartheid movement as well, at times, that the odds were against us. But actually, we should never underestimate the strength, the potential strength of what a mass movement can do. And my goodness, what an unprecedented movement this has been. The most sustained mass movement in British history. So we're not going to let it go. We're going to build it, and we're going to fight, and we're going to keep our visions in sight on freedom for Palestine from the river to the sea.
So there's been quite a few comments of people talking about the link between Palestine and other movements, anti-racist movements, sort of resistance against the far right in the country. And I think it's very prevalent, because my own experience with fighting for the right Palestinians is, as you fight for the liberation of others, as you fight to support others who are being oppressed by your government in one way or another, directly or indirectly, it becomes revealed how your own government is oppressing you. And over here, that's the way how our country is trying to we've all seen how our movement has been labelled as anti-Semitic, Islamist, extremists, when we just trying to advocate for peace and for people to be left alone and have the right to lead their own lives and build their own society and rule their own land. We have seen Palestine Action being labelled as a terrorist organisation. The more we support other groups who need the support, the more we see the flaws in our own democracy, we see the flaws in our own mainstream media and the bias they have. We see more the authoritarianism in our own state and government. But that, in a way, is almost a good thing, because it means as more people become drawn into the movement, they become more aware of these flaws, of these issues, and thus it becomes easier to organise people, to educate them, to make them know of the problems in our society and build movements against it, whether that be your trade union movements, whether that be your anti-racist movements. All of these movements help to create a society that will one day be better for us and for Palestine. And that is why I think the slogan, "We are in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians," is so important.
I want to say something very, very briefly about a number of people have spoken about you continuing in your divestment work, and it is fundamental. And please take inspiration and hope from the fact that, as I said, 27 councils have now made commitments. Some of them, that still needs to be pursued. Those commitments need to be turned into action. But it really is not a small thing. When we began this work, I spoke to a lot of climate justice campaigners. We took advice from them, and every single one of them said, this is really hard work. It's very difficult to get local government pension schemes to divest. But in the past 15 months, since we defeated the anti-boycott bill, 27 councils committing to divestment is huge. We know why they're doing it. They're very worried about the impact of their positions in relation to Palestine on votes. And we will be launching very soon as an adjunct and as an extra motor to divestment, a pledge that's linked to the local elections coming up, where we're asking all councillors to sign a pledge of what they will do if they're elected. And divestment is absolutely central to that pledge. And one final thing, thank you to Rob, because I neglected one part of my fundamental task, which was to rally you all to come to London on the 29th. Let me just say something about that. Because as I said, we're at a moment where there's an attempt to renormalise, to tell us there's no reason for us to protest, to refocus attention. We know that people are not seeing on their screens the same scale of daily slaughter that they did, that motivated so many people to become engaged. It is important that we have another large demonstration, and I'm always very clear about what's the purpose of demonstrations. We're not naive enough to think if lots of people march, then everything changes. Of course not. But what they do, first of all, they give a very clear message to the Palestinian people of the strength of solidarity in this country. They give a message to the political establishment. People know that if you get 100,000 people marching, what that represents in terms of the size of opinion. But thirdly, as Liz said, and this is really important, they galvanise people. They act as a force of mutual solidarity where we take strength from each other and become galvanised to go back into our communities, as all of you have done, and take up the important campaigns that place material pressure to end UK complicity, including on public bodies and local authorities. So please carry on everything you're doing. I take inspiration from the strength of these meetings that happen all over the country, 100 branches we've got now. And I hope to see many of you on the streets of London on the 29th.
I think the first one, probably where everyone might want an update, the question about what's next steps for the divestment campaign. If you haven't signed the petition already, we do have a petition here today. So we do have a few petitions going around. And we are planning to go back to the pension committee. Now we're targeting the pension committee particularly because, as was stated, it is a one-person vote. We've had a few more meetings with Unison to clear up some confusion there. So we are hopeful we're going to get that through. If we don't go back in December, we certainly will go back in March. Dorset Council made some changes last year where they don't review things within 6 months, regardless of whether if there's complete holes in it and the information they give you is completely fabricated. Apparently that's completely fine in politics today, but hey. So that's the update there. We would like to arrange some more petition signings. I know Sam organised a fantastic one in Dorchester a few weeks ago, and honestly we've got so many signatures. I've done it as well with my mother. We turned up to it wasn't a PSC event, it was a map raising, fundraising event organised by another group. But actually the response from the public is incredibly positive. Dorchester's quite conservative really. You wouldn't expect to have such a positive reception, but on the whole we do. You always get one or two hecklers, but if you haven't done one of those things before, I would really encourage it. One, when you kind of faced with all the horrors that are going on, it's nice to see the general consensus, despite what the media say, and despite what the politicians said, actually the general consensus as the public are with the movement and with Palestine. And also it builds a movement and puts that pressure on the council to divest, which is absolutely key and sends a clear message. The other question someone had was around women's movement. I think this was actually, I think Sam mentioned it, that women have been absolutely key, and they are key in most movements, and this is included in Palestine. And I would use another example of this would be actually Iran, which I know sends everyone off, but even when it came to the Shah, women were the head of that movement. They pushed that movement, they saw issues with it, so regardless of the Shah being backed by the West, ultimately the public rejected it. regardless of all of the criticisms of the current leadership, actually, when Israel took and America took the decision to bomb Iran, what they actually created was a more nationalist movement. So even people who are quite critical within Iran of their leadership, they still do not want someone else dictating who their leader is. And change will come from them within, and you can see this. So again, women are leading the change within Iran. You can see they've been taking their headscarves off, they've been doing a lot more protests, and the leadership can see that this is a mass movement building. There have been a lot less arrests, and they're having to recalculate how they deal with these rules, and that's even causing conflicts within Iran's leadership. So I think it just reiterates that example of change comes from within, from mass movements and from people deciding for themselves what they want. So, you know, regardless of how many bombs Israel and America drop, ultimately it will be the people who will decide their fate, from Iran to the UK to Palestine. And you know, women are at the front of that in every culture. So
one of the things we did, if you've really not done that much and you're worried, one of the first actions we did was bring your kafir to work day. You know, those companies have that bring your kid to work, so we did bring your kafir to work. And it was really hilarious because the council, who had already said, oh, it's fine if you want to wear a kafir, that's absolutely fine, then added on, apart from the day that Unison's saying wear a kafir to work, because that could be inflammatory. So why? Because we said it, I had no idea, but obviously they thought lots of people would respond. So we made sure lots of people would respond, actually. We went on the website, we bought every kafir that the PSC had on sale, and got them in. We got as many as we could, and we got loads of people wearing a kafir to work, and actually loads of people still wear the kafir to work every day. That was a really breakthrough thing that we did, because it was very, very visible. When somebody talks about knowing your history, and said, you know, looking for a showing of Palestine 36. We've done a number of trade union, you know, branch nights out to see political movies, and we went to see Palestine 36 actually together. We got a whole group of us to go and see it together, and we did the same for The Voice of Hind Rajab actually as well. Both of them really, really great films, and both of them built people's determination to keep doing more. Actually, the thing about Palestine 36, it makes you rage against our own rulers, to be honest, and you see the similarities between what the British did then to what both the British and the Israelis do now, obviously specifically in Palestine, but actually the British are around the world, and it makes you want to take on the complicity and the involvement of our government in what's happening in Gaza. One of the people who came with us said she came out of it wanting to wrap a kafir around her head, tie her hair up, get on a horse and charge at Downing Street, which I thought was a really, really good response to it. She's also become a steward since seeing that film. So I do think things like, because it also led to us having a discussion about about why 7th of October wasn't the start, but also about the kind of world we live in, where colonial rulers and imperialism, and imperialist rulers think this is absolutely acceptable to go around the world doing that, and that they do a modern version of it today. And what do we do about it today? And to try and bring it today, one of the things that we're now in the middle of organising, the local hospital down the road from our council office, a consultant there has been going over to Gaza, and we've got him to agree that he will do a talk and sort of slideshow to local trade unionists in the area that we're going to host. Things like that I think are really important for helping to bring people together and to make them feel more confident. I could talk at length, but I won't for Ben's sake, about women and resistance. Our delegations on the demonstrations are nearly all women actually, which is really quite interesting. But the bottom line is, I think that when you look at what's happened in Palestine and the horror that people feel about what's happened in Gaza, you also do have to think about what could be the solution. And we start to think of a movement of exploited and oppressed people, of people who are fighting for self-determination, and how clearly they have been and can be an inspiration for us to try and change the world, and for us to take on our own bosses, our own rulers, who are the ones who carry out the carnage in other parts of the world, I think is a really, really important role that trade unions can play here. That's why we have to say welfare, not warfare. That's why, as well as being out on the 29th, we, you know, in London we have to, and wherever you are, we have to be out on the eve of the budget day to put those arguments of spend the money on the public services, not on bombs. And that's something really, really concrete that we can do that can make a difference to the Palestinians, but also make a difference to the crappy world that we live in. Thanks.